It was what we'd been waiting for. The first snow of winter fell in great fluffy patches, and we all knew what it meant. When I was a kid, I remember waiting patiently for the first snows. Sometimes it hit North Georgia in December. Sometimes it came before Thanksgiving. A few times in my life, I even saw it come down before Halloween. But it always came eventually. It was a constant in this part of the world, as constant as the migrating birds or the pumpkin harvest, and the arrival of snow was almost as prophetic as the calendar. We had taken the unreasonably warm November as a good sign, but it appeared that now the snow was here. The snow never came anywhere close to the gardens, of course, but we could see it falling across the town. It didn't matter if it fell in the parking lot or not, of course. It was merely a sign of the conflict to come. The declaration we'd received before Halloween had been very clear, and we knew that if an attack was coming, it would be now. We'd been preparing for over a month, despite how little the lady thought of the challenge. The old goats were making preparations, despite the lady's feelings, and the park had become an armed camp. It's me again, your favorite security guard. Welcome to the war effort for Cashmere Botanical Gardens. Since early November, the Brandylow and the forces of summer have been making preparations for the coming battle with the Green Man. We've raised earthen barriers, something we told the park goers was for a display on erosion, and Randy and Tobias have been drawing in more allies for the coming fight. Our allies in the field, the ever-destructive gnomes, have reported that the Green Man is gathering his own forces at an alarming rate. He had pumpkin heads, scarecrows, some kind of corn monstrosities, and a host of humans willing to follow him for power and wealth. The numbers varied, but sounded like he had about 100 or so of the pumpkin heads, and 3 times as many scarecrows. They didn't know how many of the corn things he had, but it sounded like we were outnumbered either way. We had Rasfiel, but what could one tree creature do against an army? He answered my question a couple of days later. I had struck up a friendship with him, the two of us bonding over stories of our lives. He had way more than me, having existed for a long, long time, but he enjoyed my tales of mundanity and the ideas of a normal life. One night when I went to see him, I saw him staring off into the distance, standing as still as, well, a tree. He was emitting a low vibration from his wooden body, a sound too high-pitched for me to hear, and when I came to stand beside him, he looked down and I heard the sound taper off. It was hard to tell. His face wasn't as expressive as the ones in the area where the lady displayed her grisly artwork, but I got the idea that he was happy to see me. What was all that about, big guy? Rasfiel always spoke inside my head, his mouth not made for speaking, and sometimes there were pictures too. The picture he sent me was of a grove of trees growing close together, and a clear message of family. Family? I asked. Are you calling for your... I paused, having almost said people, but he seemed to understand and nodded. Would they come? I asked. He sent me a little picture of a grove of trees bowing down to the lady. They served her once, he said in his creaky old voice. They might again. I nodded. I hope so. When I told Randy about it, he laughed out loud. Shoot, it'd be nice to get a few more of them walking trees. I mean, besides the ones we have. We need fighters. Trees with muscle, like Rasfiel, not birches and oaks with snaky roots. Translation, we need troops that are a little more mobile. I agreed, but I knew most of our defenses were dependent on the ladies taking part. I'd met her a few times for our evening walks, telling her about Halloween and Christmas especially, but she always changed the subject when the war came up. She seemed younger this time of year, more girl than crone, and she reminded me of the Snow Queen from the C.S. Lewis books. I would never have told her such. The White Witch was the bad guy, after all, but the parallels weren't lost on me. My lady, I said one night, we could really use your help with the preparations for the coming war. We had been talking about Christmas, Santa Claus to be specific, and her smile had melted away like snow on the hot top. Did Randolph ask you to talk to me? She said icily, and I shook my head. No, Randy and Tobias are making plans, But I'm worried. They don't think we have enough people to stand against them. The scouts say it's been a busy year for him, and I'm afraid we won't be able to defend this place if he comes." She laughed then, and her laughter was like the tinkling of icicles in a heavy wind. "Do not fret. I have means. I have friends. This would not be the first time I've put aside such an attack. The Green Man has hounded me since before I stepped out of our world and into yours. Like the seasons, sometimes he is up and sometimes he is down. We fight constantly, but it always ends in stalemate. I don't honestly know if we can defeat each other, but next year we will inevitably dance the dance again." She seemed utterly nonplussed about something that could easily lose her the seat of power that she had fought so hard to obtain. Perhaps she had forgotten what war was like while she was trapped inside that statue. Maybe, I thought, this Green Man had been the one to put her there. I wondered if she'd had a court as large as this one when she'd gone into plaster, and the thought made me realize that she probably continued to grow her power from within the statue. How long had she been inside the park? How long had Dr. Thurston's father held her before his son had lost control? She said goodbye not long after that, but I was left with nothing but questions. I came back to find Randy and Tobias having a loud argument in the security hut. Neither of them looked up when I came in, and it seemed they had forgotten everything except their disagreement. I was a little shocked. I didn't think I had heard Tobias talk that much in the whole time that I'd known him, and I had never heard him raise his voice. "We cannot contact them without the lady's permission," Tobias said, the tone letting me know that it was something he'd said a few times. "But they could turn the tide of battle," Randy said, throwing his hands in the air. "Do you want to get killed by this green guy when he comes around?" "Green man," Tobias corrected him. "And no, obviously I don't want to get killed, but this will be seen as a betrayal if she doesn't approve. If she doesn't get serious about this, then there won't be another war for her to look down her nose at. We'll all be dead, and she'll be in his hands again. You don't want that, right?" Tobias bristled a little. "Of course not. You could be exiled for this, though. The courts are not to be contacted under any circumstances, especially not if the lady isn't going to be in attendance when the talk takes place." Randy opened his mouth to say something that would likely have led to more shouting, and I opened the door and closed it louder to draw the attention of the two Brandylow. "What are you two arguing about?" I asked, coming in to stand between them. Tobias pointed an accusing finger at Randy. "The captain here wants to contact the Fey courts of Winter without the express consent of the lady." There was silence for a moment as I processed that. "The what?" I finally asked, not sure I'd heard him right. "The bloody Fey courts, the beings that hold sway over the seasons. It's a solid plan. If we can get the Winter Fey on our side, then we can use them against the Green Man." Tobias put a hand to his face and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Not only would that be a huge slap in the face of Titania, the Queen of Summer, and the Fey, who has extended a place to the lady within her court, but Queen Mab is the patron of the Green Man. Why would she turn her back on a champion of winter to side with the lady of her clearly summery rival?" Randy sat back, scratching his furry chin as he thought. "Well, Mab would be Queen Mab," Tobias corrected. "Whatever. We know, Manling, it isn't whatever. Queen Mab does not tolerate insolence, and neither will Titania. Queen Mab has been known to flay emissaries alive when they cross her. If you intend to get yourself killed by a fairy queen, then exile might be a better option for you." "Wait," I said, sitting down as I tried to put it together. "You mean the fairy courts? Like the one from Shakespeare? They're real?" Tobias turned and gave me a look as if he were surrounded by fools. "Do they not teach children anything in this school that they send them to? Even in my time, we knew the fairy courts were real. Who else would bring the seasons? Who else would change the fates of mortals?" Randy and I shrugged in unison, and Tobias sighed as he sat down heavily. "You want to strike a deal with the Winter Fae, and you don't even know they exist. This is already off to a great start. So enlighten me. I think it's a good idea, and I'll call on them for help, with or without your help. Randy shook his head. Very well. The Fey Courts are old, and as in older than man. They are forces of nature, and they don't help people out of the goodness of their hearts. You would need to make a deal with them. A deal you aren't prepared to make. A deal you can't make. Why not? Randy asked. Because the deal is almost always for your soul, and you don't currently have one to trade. The lady holds your soul, our souls, and she's not going to give it back to you just so you can strike a one-sided deal with Winter. Randy blew out a breath, sounding like a horse before hitting the table. Well, damn, how else are we going to get them to fight with us? We need allies, Tobias. We got 70 Brandylow and a few hundred gnomes, and a Grove Guardian. They're going to walk right over the top of us. We have the trees, Randy reminded him, and the lady. Have a little faith, Randy. I'm trying, but that was when the rumbles began. Luckily, they had chosen nighttime to come to us, because if they'd come during the day, it would have likely caused a panic. The ground thrummed, shaking things off the desk and sending some of the monitors into fits of snow. It was like being in an earthquake, and Randy cursed as he asked what was happening. To my surprise, Tobias was smiling as he felt the vibrations and clearly recognized them. Sounds like you might have your allies, he said a little smugly. We were out the door in a few seconds, but we were nowhere near as quick as Racefell. The tree man was striding across the park, adding his rumbling steps to the shaking, and we followed closely behind him. He was heading for the front gate, and as I came up behind him, I could already see something coming towards the other side. It was like a small forest coming through the parking lot, and I remembered thinking that they made Racefell look like a child by comparison. As the gates came open, he rumbled in excitement as it approached the growing trees. These were the trees from the vision he had sent me. These were the trees that had bowed to the lady. They were all twice the size of Racefell, and by my count, there were 12 of them at least. It looked like the grove was about to get crowded, and I hoped our little wooden guardian would explain the rules to his new family. Whatever might happen, the sight of the trees embracing their smaller fellow was very cute and more than a little heartwarming. Think we might be able to hold them off with 13 more Grove Guardians? I asked, nudging Randy as he began to grin. You know, I think we just might, he answered. You're still here. Thanks so much for joining us for tonight's spooky tale. If you'd like a little bit more spooky in your life, why not click on one of the videos that appears at the end of our story, or maybe head on over to one of our playlists where you can get your fill of spooky content. If you like your spooky a little more tactile, I've got a new book that's come out. If you'd like your own copy, there's a link below in the description where you can get your own copy of my spooky book. If you like what you see here on the channel and think you might like to support in a more monetized way, then why not come over to Patreon or become a member on YouTube? Speaking of, let's go ahead and thank our members now. Thanks to Civ Garstad and Unicorn Hollow for being our spooky ghost contributors. Thanks to Saikat, Lee Kendall, Janet, and Chris Kinsella for being our spooky skeleton tier contributors. And, of course, thanks to Xaronan, Winter, Tyler Parker, Stephanie Carrington, Sarah ASMR, Hi Stacy, Emily Coltsfoot, and Cinnamon Fox, and Bella Lee for being our ghostly reader tier contributors. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. As I said, if you'd like to have your name read out at the end of every episode that I make, and maybe get a little more, come on down to Patreon and sign up, or become a member on YouTube. Ghostly Reader tier contributors get a book anytime I write one, which is usually about twice a year. So, what are you waiting for? Come on down and give it a look. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.